And the first thing I remember seeing of a shark was this great white shark breaching out of the water, and landing in like a big splash after, I forget if it caught the decoy seal or not. And I was just completely enthralled. I was mesmerized. I said, that's it. That's what I want to study.
She grew up on an island, surrounded by the sea. A girl from Puerto Rico who felt most at home near the water. She'd visit the ocean often, drawn to it for some unknown reason. There, she fell in love, her first love, with the sea and the life within it. One day, when she was just a little bit older, she was flipping channels and stumbled upon something she had never seen before. A shark leaping out of the ocean on Discovery Channel's Shark Week. In that moment, with a flash of teeth, water, and wonder, a wide-eyed girl knew exactly what she wanted to do with the rest of her life. She wanted to study sharks. Little did she know that her newfound path would lead her to places most of us can only dream about. That path would lead her from Puerto Rico to Florida, New Zealand, and finally Australia. That path would have her on boats, living, on submarines, descending to depths, on helicopters, flying high in the sky, all in the pursuit of her dream. She'd learn to tag animals, some of the oldest on Earth, and she would travel. Not just to her local beaches, but to continents, all 7 of them. That path would lead her to write children's books on marine life. It would lead her to become a speaker at TEDx, and it would lead her to be featured on Disney Plus, the BBC, and National Geographic. That path would even see her survive an animal bite. And not of a shark, mind you, but from a crocodile. But through it all, her mission has remained the same: to change how the world sees one of the planet's most misunderstood creatures. So, Miss Melissa Márquez, thank you for being with me today. You're an inspiring figure in marine science and science communication. You were born in Puerto Rico. You're a marine biologist who earned your BA at New College of Florida, a master's degree in marine biology from Victoria University in New Zealand, and currently working on your PhD at Curtin University in Australia. You're known for your work studying sharks and their relatives. You're also known for your mission to shift how the world perceives these misunderstood predators. You're the founder of the Fins United Initiative, which provides free bilingual resources on sharks, rays, and chimeras. A popular voice on Discovery Channel's Shark Week, also a TEDx speaker. On top of that, you're a Forbes 30 under 30 finalist, author of Wild Survival children's series, writer of Mother of Sharks book, along with the book Sea of Constellations. Your work has been featured in Science and PR, in Style, Popular Science, and showcased in Disney Plus, BBC, National Geographic, Discovery Channel, and Good Morning America. Melissa, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So, what made you want to become a marine biologist who studies sharks?
I've always kind of been fascinated by animals that seem misunderstood or have kind of like a bad reputation that they don't deserve. And I think that, coupled with the fact that I grew up on an island, surrounded by water, and my first memories are of me being in the water, it kind of just put 2 and 2 together, in that I fell in love with an animal from the ocean that has probably one of the worst reputations on the planet right now.
Yeah, so you would go to the ocean, you'd fell in love with the water, the sea, sharks. What was it about sharks specifically that drew you?
There's a lot of mystery around them, even the most famous ones like great white sharks. There's a lot of research that's been done into them, but there's still so many mysteries and things we don't know about them. We've never seen them mate. We don't know where they pup. We have vague ideas, but nothing 100% concrete just yet. And so to me, I think it's the mystery that kind of cloaks these animals that entices me to want to learn more about them.
Did you have inspiration when you were a young girl that I think I read that your mom was a scientist. Did she inspire you at all into pursuing this degree?
Yeah, I think science as a whole kind of became a bit more accessible because of my mom. She was a biochemical engineer, so completely different from biology or anything that I do. And we frequently have a nice debate on which is better, chemistry or biology. Um, but yeah, she definitely was an inspiration in regards to seeing a woman in science. But outside of seeing like a Latina woman in marine biology, no, that wasn't a thing for me. So it was kind of going into the industry quite blind. There were some incredible women in science and specifically marine science that did pave the way, such as Eugenie Clark and Sylvia Earle, that I was able to look up to. But specifically as a Latina, no, not when I grew up.
So you grew up there in Puerto Rico. I think you went to Mexico for a little while and then
Yeah.
Florida for your degree.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I moved around quite a bit when I was young. Went from Puerto Rico to Mexico, up to New Jersey for a couple of years, and then eventually moved back down to Florida, which is where I finished out my younger education and then did my bachelor's degree there.
And then from Florida, you decided to go to New Zealand. Is that right? For your master's?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Decided to go from the giant continent of the Americas all the way to a small little island. So kind of almost in a way going back to my roots, just colder.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite side of the equator. So, seasons are all backwards for us.
Oh yeah, there was I think like an 85 to 90-degree Fahrenheit difference between when I left Florida, which was like 100 and something degrees Fahrenheit, to when I moved down to New Zealand, which was in the middle of their winter. And I think it was like 50, 40 degrees or something like that Fahrenheit when I landed and I was like, "Oh, what have I done?"
How did New Zealand compare to Florida and Puerto Rico?
It's completely different. I mean, not only the geography and the topography of it, but the culture and the people there are completely different. I grew up, luckily, a lot of the time surrounded by people that at least understood Spanish, and I could hear it kind of, in spatterings when I was out and about. Whereas in New Zealand, a lot of people, if I told them, I was from Puerto Rico, they're like, "Where in the world is that?" Sometimes I'd be told, "Oh, is that in Europe?" And I'm like, "No, that's not where I'm from." So yeah, it was definitely a bit of a culture shock, a shock to the system in regards to just weather and way of life. But I really enjoyed it. It's such a gorgeous part of the world. Pictures don't do it justice. The people are some of the kindest that I have ever met. They'll take the shirt off your back. They'll do whatever it is that you need to get done to make you feel comfortable. So yeah, I was really, really happy that I kind of took that leap of faith, went to New Zealand to do my master's degree on the cousins of sharks, so the chimeras, specifically the deep sea ones, just to kind of figure out their habitat use, what they're doing, where they are, and learn a little bit more about them. Because, at that point, or up to that point, a lot of my um, career had been focused on just sharks. And so getting to learn about a cousin of them and something that I was kind of familiar with, but not really, was really interesting.
Wow. So you go down there. I hear New Zealand's beautiful. I think they filmed Lord of the Rings down there.
Yeah,
Parts of it, it's gorgeous. And I understand. How long are you there in New Zealand for?
2, 3 years?
2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
and then you go to you get your master's, and then you go to Australia. I think to
Yes.
Western Australia to start working on your PhD.
So I actually moved to Sydney first, which is now where I'm based out of again. Um, to have a little bit of a break between my master's and my PhD. I got an opportunity then to do a PhD over in Western Australia, which is where I moved to start over at Curtin. Um, but then the pandemic happened, and that completely threw my PhD plans out of the water and sideways. Because of course you had the lockdowns, you couldn't do a lot of things, and so for me, the pandemic really shifted my area of focus when it came to sharks. Before, I was really looking at the ecology of sharks and habitat use of sharks, which I still find absolutely fascinating. I'm happy to always put a tag on a shark and see where it goes. But nowadays, I'm really more focused on the human dimensions of conservation because, we can put these invisible lines in the ocean and say, okay, this is where sharks are protected, this is not where they're protected. But the sharks don't know that those lines don't exist. And so really, if we want to properly protect animals, we have to change how we perceive them and how we interact with them. And so during the pandemic, that interest really kind of took over for me. And I started looking at the history of how we perceived sharks and how that changes, or is similar in between different cultures, what pop culture has kind of done to that perception of sharks and what that possibly means for their future. And so I've left the PhD at Curtin University, and I'm now transferring over to a university over here in the eastern side of Australia to finish out that work that I've been doing.
So somewhat of change of plans due to COVID. I think a lot of us had like alterations in our lives because of that. So, did you learn something about how the history of sharks, how sharks were perceived in the past? Has everyone always kind of been afraid of sharks, or they treated them or felt differently? Are you allowed to talk about that?
Yeah, I find it really interesting because a lot of different cultures around the world have almost similar storylines when it comes to their oral knowledge of these animals. In Western society, a lot of times it's almost black and white, where sharks are seen as mindless killers, or they're just seen as sharks and part of the ecosystem. Whereas in a lot of cultures, there's a whole entire breadth of them. Some of them saw them as tricksters, some of them saw them as a good omen, some of them saw them as ancestors or signs of good fortune, as protectors. And then, of course, you've got the flip side of seeing them as a bad omen, as vengeful animals. And so I think the breadth of the portrayal of sharks in other cultures outside of Western culture is really refreshing because that really is how animals are. They're not just one thing. And especially for sharks, when they have such a bad reputation, they are not mindless killers. That title has kind of been thrust upon them. They're a lot more complex than that, and that should be acknowledged.
Yeah, sharks are such beautiful creatures. The more I learn about them, the more fascinating they become to me. What about sharks fascinates you the most?
I think the fact that there are so many different species. So a lot of people, when you say sharks, you think hammerhead, bull shark, great white shark, tiger shark, and maybe the occasional kind of other unique one, like a goblin shark or anything like that. But there's actually over 500 different species. And so I think that variety and that diversity is really interesting to me because each one of them has adapted so perfectly to the habitat and the environment that they're a part of. And of course, you don't often see them portrayed in the media, or on socials or on TV or documentaries or anything like that because they're not as charismatic, they're not as well known. But I do wish there was more out there that showcased that diversity because it's just so fascinating. I mean, these animals have been around for millions of years. Sharks, as a general kind of whole species, are older than trees. So there was sharks on our planet before there was trees, which I find absolutely mind blowing. So yeah, I wish people put a little bit more respect to their name.
Yeah, I think they were over 400 million years old, sharks
Hmm.
are, and I don't recall how many millions of years trees are, but yeah, sharks are older. When I heard that statistic, I was blown away. I go, "That can't be true," and I looked it
Yeah.
up. Mhm. Was there a defining moment in your life when you recall deciding, I'm gonna be a marine biologist. I wanna study sharks. Was it immediate or was it more of a gradual thing?
I know I've always wanted to be a marine biologist, but for me, what kind of sticks out in my head is kind of like the ticking point specifically for sharks was when we were moving from Mexico to the States. My family sat me down in like my room, gave me like a remote, and they were like, "All right, have at it." And it was my first time, having an English TV, but also being able to have the remote and have multiple channels. Because back in Mexico, I wasn't really allowed to kind of flip through the TV mindlessly. And so while I was kind of going through the channels, Discovery Channel Shark Week popped up. And the first thing I remember seeing of a shark was this great white shark breaching out of the water and landing in like a big splash after, I forget if it caught the decoy seal or not. And I was just completely enthralled. I was mesmerized. I said, that's it. That's what I want to study. And I'm sure my parents thought it was a phase. They were like, all right, this week she wants to study sharks. Next week she's going to want to be, I don't know, a wedding dress planner or designer or something like that. It'll pass. And 30 years later, I'm still in this phase.
Yeah, so you did it, you stuck with it, and it seems like you still enjoy it. You had that dream as a girl and it seems like you're living it right now. I think that's inspiring.
No, I'm really lucky to say that I have.
So you've been to all 7 continents, lived on boats for months, been in submarines, helicopters, and tagged some of the oldest animals on Earth. What drives you to keep exploring and experience the world in these ways?
To me, I think one of the best qualities that I have is that I'm constantly curious. Um, I love learning things, and so for me, that's kind of the drive in doing what I do, is having all these questions in my head and wanting answers. And so that's the underlying why as to why I do everything that I do.
Of all these experiences, is there one day that stands out to you as truly unforgettable?
I've been really blessed that I've had some amazing opportunities land in my lap and work towards. I can't just narrow it down to one. Off the top of my head, I think about being able to be in a glass bottom canoe in one of the local bioluminescent bays back home in Puerto Rico for a TV show and getting to show the world just how beautiful that bioluminescence is through a shark swimming through it. It looks like it's been just absolutely painted in like glow in the dark paint and is just flying through an underwater galaxy. Getting to be in submarines and see sharks in situ or in their own wild habitat like never before, and getting to see them exhibit behaviors that we haven't seen before in the scientific world is something that absolutely blows my mind. And I'm really blessed to say that I was a part of going up in helicopters and seeing animals that are ginormous and are the biggest animals in the world, and seeing them as just a tiny little speck in the ocean is just really humbling and mind-blowing. And so, I don't have just one single day. I'm very lucky that I have many moments that stick out in my head as just special once in a lifetime moments.
Do you have, so you study sharks, a lot of sharks, you've seen a lot of sharks, obviously. Do you have a favorite shark
Tiger
and
sharks.
tiger sharks? Why do you like tiger sharks?
They're just very charismatic. Anytime I've been in the water with them, they're very inquisitive. They get up in your space. They want to know what you are, and they're very curious about what this strange thing that's blowing bubbles in their environment is. They're just beautiful as well. The name tiger shark comes from tiger-like stripes on the side of their body um, that fade as they grow older, and they eat a plethora of things. They're not discriminatory when it comes to that. We've found some really interesting things in their stomach, from unexploded or undetonated TNT, suits of armor, chicken wire, a porcupine, songbirds, uh, license plates, just tons of weird stuff. And so, yeah, they just fascinate me endlessly.
And they're all over the world, right? Tiger sharks are just located everywhere.
Yeah, in a lot of the tropical areas. So you've got them in Florida, in the Caribbean area. You've got them in certain parts of South America, in the Indian Ocean, here in Eastern Australia as well. So yeah, they're pretty cosmopolitan species.
So you founded Fins United Initiative. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so part of the reason why I founded Fins United was because I wanted more accessible shark education out there. And I've kind of not strayed away from it, but now it's become a little bit more encompassing that it's not just about sharks and their relatives, but it's about wildlife in general. Because I've realized that there's not a lot of reliable education out there that's accessible in multiple languages for people. And so a lot of my social media and a lot of the content that I push out is resources such as books that already exist that people can check out of their local libraries or get from their indie bookstores and read about different animals or habitats or about themes in wildlife. Talk about explainers of, what's happening in the world. Can you explain in a little bit more detail about certain things like the myths around the Bermuda Triangle, or are mermaids real? Is megalodon an actual thing? What's going on with the red bloom or the red algae bloom that we've got currently going on in South Australia? And so just little explainers and little tidbits about what's happening in the natural world and making it a bit more fun and adding a little bit of whimsy to people's life when it comes to learning about the amazing planet that we inhabit.
Is it geared more towards everybody or children specifically?
There's a little bit of everything for everybody. Some of the stuff that I put out, like some of the explainers and some of the book recommendations, are more for adults. There is, of course, some stuff that is out there for children. So some of the book recommendations are more geared towards children ages. The activities are geared towards children's ages. My own bilingual book club, which is looking at nature and wildlife books, and then having a bunch of activities based off of the books, so the learning can continue outside of those pages, is geared towards kids ages 4 to about 11.
So you work with, you work in the ocean, you research sharks, but you were once bitten by a crocodile
Yeah.
while filming for Shark Week. Can you tell me about that experience? What was going through your mind? How it changed you and how you face uh, wildlife encounters?
So, as you were saying, yeah, I was bitten by a crocodile while I was filming for Shark Week back in, I believe it was 2018, if I remember correctly, or maybe 2009 or 17. And I think the first thing that kind of went through my mind was actually figuring out, oh, it's not a shark. Because if people watch the episode, this actually happened at night and we were completely obscured by darkness. The only time you could see anything was the light that was near the water or was put in the water. So outside of that sphere of light, you can't really see anything. And I was just on the edge of that sphere. We had just finished filming, and that's when the croc grabbed my leg and bit and dragged me backwards. Um, I don't study crocodiles. That's not my area of expertise whatsoever, but I do know about them. I do know about their predation style and the way that they hunt. And so in the back of my head, the first thing was don't move, because I thought, oh, if it thinks I'm not food, maybe it'll let me go. I've seen many experts previously state the opposite, which is fight like heck for your life.
Hmm.
But for me, for some reason, it just felt like in that instant, don't move. And I'm not sure if it was that the crocodile had a bit more of a better temper than other ones around the area, if maybe it wasn't very hungry, or my idea was that it was probably an exploratory bite, which is very similar to what sharks do. They take a bite to figure out what something is. Their mouth is just full of sensory receptors, and so they're trying to figure out what exactly I am. And I think it was just taking an exploratory bite to figure out what the heck I was, realize I wasn't the food that it wanted, and it let me go.
Was that in the ocean or were you in like a lake or a river?
Mangrove.
Mangroves. Okay. Are you afraid of crocodiles now, or it really didn't have an effect on you?
No, I mean, I think the year afterwards, it wasn't that I was afraid of them, but I was a little bit more aware of them. Especially like if I go to a zoo or anything like that. Now I think there's been enough time, it's been almost a decade. Um, which is wild to think about. Um, but it almost feels like a whole entire different lifetime ago. And so not that I'm fully removed from it, but it's not like I'm having recurring nightmares or anything like that. It's not like I hate crocodiles or I'm afraid of them or anything like that. It's just an interesting little anecdote to one day tell my kids.
I have a daughter, a young daughter, love her dearly. Um, that must have taken a lot of courage
Mm,
to not have a lot of visible role models besides your mom, and then you taking that leap, that risk. That's not something that all young girls would do. What what do you think it is about you that made you do that?
very stubborn. I think it's one of those things. I'm very blessed with being like my mom in that regard, that once we want something, we're gonna go after it and get it. And the same thing could be said for her. She grew up in a time where being a woman scientist was even more unheard of. Nowadays, even when I was a child, it was a bit more socially accepted. But when she was growing up, it was very much, especially in the Latino culture, it was very much you stay at home, you take care of the husband, you have kids, you have your role at home, not you're going to pave your own career in your own way. And so I think for me, having again that role model of if she can do it, I can do it, but also being very stubborn and having that streak of, well, you're not going to tell me what I can and can't do, um, really helped me. Because, yeah, it was very lonely at times. And there was, of course, multiple times where I did wonder the validity of my dreams, of whether or not I was able to become not so much just a Latina marine scientist, but a Latina shark scientist. And so I think that's something that a lot of people understand, that lack of belonging and wanting to belong, and wondering if, there is a place at the metaphorical table for them. And that's why I'm so passionate about representation and making sure that the kids of this upcoming generation and the current generations that we have can look at a lineup of people in whatever industry that they're interested in and be like, oh, yeah, I do see myself up there. Cool, I can do that too. And not have to have those wonders and worries of, will I be accepted? Is this something I can actually do?
Yeah, I think you're gonna be one of those examples that you mentioned earlier. You're gonna be one of those women, I think, that young girls may mention if they want to become marine biologists. You're one of the few, and you're very young, um, so you still have like a whole career ahead of you. So, kind of excited to kind of see where you go.
Oh, thank you. And I do take that responsibility very seriously. I'm aware that I get to be that role model that I wished I had when I was younger. And so I try when people reach out to me with their kids having questions or wanting videos or anything like that, I try to get back to them because I know how much that would have meant for me if I was in their shoes. Like I always knew I was going to have the ocean be some part of my life, have nature be some part of my life. I just didn't know what shape that would take. And even now, I'm going down such drastically different paths than I anticipated even, 10 years ago. Um, that, yeah, I think I've always just known that my life was going to be intertwined with nature and storytelling in some sort of way and fashion. I just didn't know what that was going to look like. And like you said, I am quite young in the grand scheme of things. And so I'm excited to see the rest of the life that I'm allowed to have. I'm excited to see where that leads me.